What if the man you trusted most, the one you called a prophet, was hiding a secret so dark it could shatter everything you believed in? Imagine witnessing miracles beyond comprehension, rising to fame and wealth beyond your wildest dreams, but at a price no one could ever repay. Pastor Richard's rise to power seemed like a blessing from God, yet beneath the surface lay a chilling truth, a pact made in desperation, with forces far darker than anyone could imagine. The whisper started, the shadows moved, the screams filled the night, but by then, it was already too late. Stay with me as we uncover the haunting tale of Pastor Richard's meteoric rise, the price of his power, and the terrifying revelation that shook his congregation to its core. What was the truth behind the miracles? And what happened the day the snake spoke? You won't believe how this ends. Pastor Richard had always dreamed of a better life. Growing up in a small, barren village, life was a daily struggle for survival. His family often went to bed hungry, and Richard's hopes seemed distant, buried beneath a mountain of hardship. But deep inside, he dreamed of breaking free. He wanted to lift his family from poverty and serve God in a way that would change not only his life but the lives of others. His dream seemed impossible until the day he met Nathaniel. Years earlier, Richard had met Nathaniel, a man struggling with the same poverty and despair. Back then, Nathaniel was just a man with ambitions, much like Richard, but unable to make anything of himself. Richard remembered how they had spoken about their shared dreams of bettering their lives, but Nathaniel had always seemed defeated by the weight of his circumstances. That was before Nathaniel's meteoric rise to power. Richard had heard the rumors. Nathaniel was now a wealthy, influential man with miracles attributed to him, and his name was spoken with reverence. The transformation was nothing short of miraculous. Richard, unable to contain his desperation any longer, sought him out. He found Nathaniel in a lavish office, far removed from the man he had once known. Nathaniel looked up in surprise when Richard walked in. "Richard, is that really you?" Nathaniel asked, his eyes wide with disbelief. Richard, standing there, overwhelmed by the change in his former acquaintance, couldn't mask the shock. "I don't understand. You were once like me, struggling, desperate. How did this happen?" Nathaniel leaned back in his chair, a knowing smile forming on his lips. "Oh, you want to know the secret behind all this?" "The same secret that changed my life," he said, gesturing to the opulence around them. "Come, meet me at my home tonight. I'll tell you everything." Later that evening, Richard arrived at Nathaniel's mansion. It felt like stepping into another world. The grandeur of the place, the expensive scent of incense filling the air, it was overwhelming. Nathaniel led him inside, and there, in a private room lined with symbols Richard could not understand, the air grew heavy with an unfamiliar energy. Nathaniel's gaze softened, his voice dropping to a low whisper. "You've come to ask how I did it, how I rose from nothing to everything. You think it was luck, don't you?" Richard nodded, his heart pounding. I need this, Nathaniel. I need the same power. I need to change my life, my family's life. I can't keep living in poverty, struggling day in and day out." Nathaniel smiled, but it was not a smile of kindness. It was cold, calculating. "You're not the first to ask. Many have come seeking what I found. But you must understand, there is a price for everything." Richard's chest tightened. "What price?" he asked, his voice shaking with fear and anticipation. Nathaniel stepped closer, handing Richard a large, ornate book bound in red leather. The symbols on the cover seemed to pulse with an unnatural energy. "You must sign this book. It will bind you to the forces that give power. Power, wealth, and miracles, all of it can be yours. But the cost is your soul. Once you sign, there's no turning back." Richard hesitated. The weight of his family's suffering pressed heavily on his mind, the hunger, the shame, the endless struggle. Finally, with trembling hands, he signed his name. As soon as the ink dried, the room seemed to come alive. A violent wind stirred the candles, their flames flickering wildly. Whispers filled the air, distant voices calling his name. Nathaniel laughed, a sound that chilled Richard to the bone. "Welcome to the brotherhood, Richard. You've taken the first step." The miracles began immediately. Word spread like wildfire, blind people healed, the sick cured, marriages restored. Every Sunday, the church overflowed with people, spilling into the streets to hear Pastor Richard speak. His fame skyrocketed, and soon, wealth followed. He moved his family into a mansion surrounded by luxury. Cars lined the driveway, and servants rushed to meet his every need. He wore fine suits, gold watches, and spoke with authority. His prophecies came true, and the people believed he was divinely chosen. But despite the outward show of success, something darker began to take hold of Richard. Every morning, before sunrise, he would lock himself in the prayer room. People knew of the room but never dared enter. It wasn't forbidden, but there was an eerie aura about it. Those who did venture near never saw anything unusual, just a quiet, dimly lit room. But the truth was hidden inside. Each day, Richard entered the room with a new Bible. No one knew what transpired behind that locked door, but when Richard emerged, he was always pale, his face haunted. He never spoke of what happened in there, but whispers began to circulate. The voices of betrayal grew louder, accusing him of something terrible, of a price yet to be paid. Pastor Samuel, once a mentor to Richard and a man of unwavering faith, began to notice the change in his old friend. At first, he had rejoiced in Richard's success, but as the years passed, he grew uneasy. Richard had always been humble, but now he was consumed by power and material wealth. His sermons had begun to focus more on prosperity than on the true teachings of faith. Samuel found himself questioning the miracles that had built Richard's empire. One evening, as Samuel pondered the growing dissonance between his own beliefs and Richard's teachings, he decided to visit his old friend. "Richard," Samuel said as he entered the mansion, "I've come to speak with you. How did you rise so quickly? What's really going on here?" Richard's eyes darkened. His voice was cold as he spoke. "Some questions are better left unanswered, Samuel. Let it go." But Samuel couldn't shake the feeling that something was terribly wrong. Driven by suspicion, he sneaked into the mansion that night. He made his way to the prayer room, where he heard strange sounds coming from inside. When he pushed the door open, he was shocked to find the room empty. No spirits, no signs, just the dim light of candles flickering. It wasn't until the day of Pastor Richard's sudden death that the truth began to unfold. Richard had performed his usual morning ritual in the prayer room, but that evening, after his sermon, he was found dead, lying motionless in his room. The news spread quickly. The congregation mourned, calling him a saint, a prophet sent by God. But when the funeral took place, something strange happened. As the coffin was opened, a massive snake lay coiled inside, hissing and twisting. The mourners froze in terror, but then, the snake spoke. "I have been sent by God," it hissed. "I am here to punish Richard for his sins." His power came at the cost of innocent souls. The snake's voice echoed in the room. "Go to the prayer room," it said. "There, you will see the truth." The mourners, in stunned silence, made their way to the prayer room. This time, as they crossed the threshold, the room felt different. The temperature dropped, and the shadows grew deeper. Then, they saw it. On the floor lay 7 Bibles, each with a grotesque human face embossed on its cover. The eyes were hollow, staring up at them. And then, the spirits appeared, 7 figures, their faces twisted with pain. They spoke in unison. "Richard desecrated 1 Bible every day. Each desecration bound us to him, gave him power. And now, the truth must be known." As the mourners stood in the prayer room, the truth about Richard's rise to power was laid bare before them. Some dropped to their knees, overcome with sorrow and guilt. Others wept bitterly, their faith shattered. They had believed in Richard, his miracles, his promises, only to realize they had been deceived. Pastor Samuel, watching from the back of the room, felt the weight of his own guilt. He had known something was wrong but had never questioned Richard. Now, standing in the room filled with whispers, Samuel spoke to the crowd. "Faith is not about the man in the pulpit," he said, his voice steady but sorrowful. "It's about your relationship with God. We placed our trust in men, not in the truth. We let greed and the desire for miracles blind us." The ruins of Richard's mansion stood as a reminder, blind faith and greed lead to destruction. True faith must be grounded in truth, not in the promises of miracles and power. As the villagers left, they vowed never again to fall victim to the illusion of power at any cost. The lesson was clear: the price of greed and blind faith is too high. But through questioning, seeking truth, and holding ourselves accountable, we find what is truly sacred.